All right, welcome everybody. We don't really have a title for what we're doing tonight. It's basically me and Todd hanging out on Zoom to celebrate two new books. His chapbook, Ragnarok at the Father-Daughter Dance, and my book, It Was Never Supposed to Be. And you're gonna hear some poems and we're gonna talk in the middle and I started to say shoot the S, but
Mm.
I'm gonna try to keep it classy tonight, despite already finishing half of my drink. Todd, how you feeling tonight?
I feel real good. This has been something I've been looking forward to since Ben came up with the idea to do the joint release together. Um, and yeah, I love the book. I've had a great time working with Variant. I continue to be stunned with the covers that both Ben and I have. Um, and yeah, I'm ready to get this out into the world. This book specifically was, something I started after I published Ways We Vanish with OK Donkey. So it's like work that started from 2020, and I'm almost like it's almost a certain catharsis being able to say, okay, that work from 2020 and the years immediately afterward, I could finally say I've released it out in the world. Maybe I can move on in some ways. So I'm excited about that. And yeah, Ben, how are you? What's
Excellent.
going on?
Well, the contractor stopped drilling about 25 minutes ago, thank goodness, and it just smells like granite countertop epoxy in here, but other than that, I'm doing
Lovely.
pretty good. Yeah, yeah. The fun of living in a construction zone. Um, yeah, I'm excited for this book. We were just talking in the before while everybody was in the waiting room. We were talking about how old some of the poems in my book are, just even from Todd's interaction with them as an early reader. But some of these poems actually go way back,
Mm.
like stuff I wrote in, I like to call it the live journal era. So it's nice to finally have a body of work that started out as some poems and became a book, and it's going out into the world. It's very exciting. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
a very, very good book. If you have not picked up your copy yet, or pre-order
Oh,
it,
thank you.
and it is stunning, and you will be stunned by what Ben shares tonight, I'm sure.
It's funny because I realized when I sent you the proof that you've never actually read these poems before as a book.
No,
You had
yeah,
only read them as like poems in email back and forth over the last several years. So, and I thought, oh wow, Todd's actually never read this manuscript as a manuscript.
nope.
So
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I was delighted. I've read it twice this week. And for those who don't know, Ben and I email each other not quite every day. I think we take Sundays off because we're both at church, right? And we are
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
yeah. But I pretty much start my day with either I'm reviewing something that Ben has sent me, or I'm reviewing something in preparation to send Ben. And it's to the point now where my Yahoo search bar for my email, when I just like go to search for to colon to see if I can pull up an email, it automatically defaults to Ben. Same for from. Like it's just if there are days where there are 25 emails stacked up because I don't actually organize Ben into his own folder. Nobody puts Ben in a box. My whole opening page of Yahoo would be just emails from Ben. And it's been one of the most fruitful and wonderful collaborations and poetry relationships I have ever had. And Ben is often the engine behind many of the good decisions in my poems. So if there's a good chance if you like something, it was something that I did not as great, and then Ben stepped in and was like, "Why don't we try this?" Um, and so
Oh,
I'm so
Pitch, you
thankful.
exaggerate.
Maybe a little bit.
Okay. I will the only helpful talent I will claim is being a submissions whisperer. I will take
Mm,
credit for that
mm.
one.
It's true. I think every place you've told me to submit, um, I've been accepted by. So. We'll see if that holds up. South Carolina Reviews has kept me on hold for like 10 months now, but we'll
Oh
see.
wow. That's a
Yeah,
long
no.
time. I still have a poetry or a New Yorker one that's closing in on 3 years old, but aren't we all in that boat? All right, let's get the formal part of this started. And I am going to introduce Todd with a bio. And I will just say that somebody just said in the chat that they love seeing these close poetry friendships. And I have to say, like, they may start as poetry friendships, but then they become real friendships. Like we have broken bread and had the Lord's juice in person. So, you know, it it's more than that, and it's a wonderful thing when you can develop that way with people and sort of be a part of their journey. That's been very exciting for me, especially with Ragnarok and being part of the journey of this work and recognizing just how it changed, but also how it held on. It held on to the pear snow from
Mm.
start to fruition, and that was a beautiful thing. So, Todd Dillard, a Pennsylvanian by way of Houston, Texas, and New York City. Todd, him, lives outside of Philadelphia, where he works as an academic writer in a children's hospital, a husband, a father, and an avid gamer. He is the author of the chapbook, The Drowned Hymns, the book, Ways We Vanish. You should order it from OK Donkey Press. And most recently, the chapbook Ragnarok at the Father Daughter Dance, available from Variant Literature, who is happily sponsoring tonight's event. His work has appeared or is forthcoming in the American Poetry Review, the Southern Review, Had, Waxwing, Pleiades, the Three Penny Review, and elsewhere. Please give your snaps and your emojis up for Todd Dillard.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to start with a poem called No Rush. There's a man down the block screaming, I love you. Can you hear me? I love you. It's a great twilight for confessing, air heavy as hands on shoulders, clouds dark as a lover's sleeping head on a spill of white sheets. Sometimes I imagine you in your death, the way I imagine my old New York roommates shopping at grocery stores in other states. You add rutabagas to your cart as if you have nothing to lose. You open a bag of life savers as you wait in the checkout line, popping one in your mouth before you pay because who cares? You only have this one death. The flavor you pick is first Thanksgiving away from home, and the sweet of Cabernet and tryptophan and char prickles your tongue like the salt in tears. Last night I dreamed grief was an unlit room that I had to clean. Just as I figured out how to navigate its darkness, I put something away and had to learn all over. You were there. You were saying, why bother, when the room was only going to get messy again. And I told you if you weren't going to help, at least get out of the way. It's quiet now. The storm splits open like sacramental bread. And I love you. I love you. Can you hear me? Write me back when you have the time. No rush. And this next poem is called Edna. My daughter is bored, so I tell her silverfish are neither silver nor a fish, but a spoon-dull insect that loves kitchens, bathrooms, the mouths of children. Silverfish, silverfish, she squeals, the word peeling from her lips and crawling down her legs. She watches me knead the day's dough and asks if Kleenex are used to clean necks. The TV says a crane collapsed off 34th, and she wants to know if it's because the crane was thirsty. Some afternoons we visit the neighborhood pool, and even though she could barely swim, my daughter isn't afraid. She's so unafraid it makes me afraid. She loves it when I pick her up and throw her as far away as possible. She loves to paddle back and scream again, again. But she loves it most when I swim away as fast as I can, when my back becomes the shore she's trying to reach. My daughters named the pool Edna. Sometimes Edna helps her reach me. When it's time to go, my daughter says, "See you soon, Edna." Every day, I am terrified in new ways. All right, and this is the opening poem of the chapbook. And it's one that's very important to me because it's kind of an idea I had in my head for a long time. But this is also a really good example of the the intelligence and craft that I benefit from having been as an early reader and a submission whisperer. He was the one who told me to send this to Guernica, and I thought, no way, and they picked it up. So thank you, Ben. Pear Snow. A flood unzips a graveyard. Cadavers sluice down Main Street. It's my job to find the dead, chauffeur them back to their plots. The problem being the dead speak. They want to swing by their old places, check on spouses, kids, grandkids, glimpsed in sepia windows beneath the blue of evening news. They whisper, "That tree was a sapling when I planted it," or "I forgot what her laugh was like," or they call a dog that refuses to come. Then, embarrassed by their weeping, by how dry it is, the dead ask me to take them home. And on the drive, I recite this line I'm working on about the graininess of 2-day-old snow. Pear snow, I call it. The dead say nothing in response. The air velvets as if it's going to rain, though the sky is clear. The moon wet as the light in a child's pupil. Gentle, I lower the dead back into their cradles. The earth, for all its stripped rancor, heavy in my shovel. The work hard, but familiar. The pay, at least, good. So I can't read. I'll read one more poem from this, but I can't read them all. It is a chapbook. Can't give all the goods away. But there's many more poems in there for you guys to check out. I love to always read some new stuff when I do a reading. And so these poems are coming out in a couple of journals this next year. I'm just going to read two new ones. Um, and yeah, here we go. This poem is called After a Few Beers, My Uncle Asks Me How. After a few beers, my uncle asks me, how do you write a poem? It's like laying bricks, I say. You put down one word, then another, and after a while you've made this path. Bullshit, my uncle says. Tell me the truth. The trick, I say, is the bricks can be anything. A window, the moon, even snow. Snow, my uncle says. I remember when I was stationed in Germany in the 80s. There was this huge field outside the base. It was the kind of cold that yanks your balls up into your stomach. So much snow you'd smoke a little hash and forget the planet you were on was Earth. I was on guard duty. Some civilian on a snowmobile raced out of the woods and rocketed across the field, waves of powder foaming up around him. I remember I shouted, hey man, you're trespassing." But he didn't hear. I didn't hear the gun fire, but when he fell off, I knew why. And the snowmobile growling like some animal. I asked my uncle, if you could catch the bullet, if you could turn the bullet into anything else, what would you pick? My uncle takes a long drink. Shit, man, he says, maybe a bird? And it appears, a little white bird in his hands, its wingtips freckled with red. What do you feed the bird? I ask. And, like a piece of bread, my uncle tears a corner off the field. The bird pecks it from his palms. How did we get here? My uncle asks, but there's so much snow we can't see the path. Before us, a dark wood. You hear that? My uncle asks. And I do. Something's in there. Something ancient. Growling. This poem is called How to Live. Depravity begins with thinking of love as a radical act. I quit loving with difficulty. I love easy now. Two parakeets on my shoulders. They'll fly away if I move. So I move. I love flight. I love cages left wide open. I am not a window. I could be a window. Open me, you'll find a dense wood, children wandering inside it. Not lost children. They know the way. They live the way horses run. If they each had a bird in hand, they would open their hands. Thanks, everyone.
Thank God you read that poem because I literally had your book open, and if you didn't read it, I was going to read it.
Okay.
All right, everybody, give it up for Todd. Let's get those like little emojis all across the screen. We need to see them. That was so good. It's
Thank you, everyone.
it's funny to hear those poems fresh with you reading them because
Mm,
I have a tendency to read them out loud and then they sound like me, but then because I know what you sound like, I can read them in Todd voice in my head.
mm.
But hearing you read them like deep inside my ears is a treat. It's very different. So,
You know what's funny
okay.
about that tangent?
Uh-huh.
I don't read my poems out loud with theater the way maybe like or with performance the way maybe I just did because I learned this writing trick when I was at Houston, where if you yell your poems, you can
Hmm.
work out the rhythm of the poem, and you can more easily find the awkward rhythmic spots and like where the syllables, jazz hands too, yeah. And so I often, when I read my poems out loud, it is with like a sort of like firm intention. So that's some of those. That's the first time I read them out loud at a reading like this. So
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Good for you. See, I read all my poems like I'm calling a square dance, and
Oh my
half the
gosh.
audience is drunk, and somebody's got two right feet.
You know what happens is if
So
I like try to read them with like, that performance, I start thinking like, is this poetry ASMR? And then I quit hearing the poem and I start hearing like, like it if anyone doesn't know what that is, I'll explain, but
that's too funny.
it
See,
is
I
too
don't
funny.
have that luxury because I sound like a banjo no matter what I'm saying. So,
The way you said husband when you introduced me, I was
husband.
like, damn straight.
There's something about the word husband that
I
I
know,
just
right?
I that US just like it goes as far down my vocal cords as it can. I
Mm,
don't this dude, it's dumb. Whatever.
mm.
Okay. So the middle section, we are going to have conversation. We're going to let everybody ask questions after I read. If anyone has questions at that late hour, by all means, I will have had another cocktail and probably be willing to tell too much even though my in-laws are in here and they are not allowed to ask me any probing questions after I've had two drinks. But um yeah, so we came up with like some topics. Oh, somebody else is trying to get in. Let me hit admit. Um we came up with some topics, sort of like questions that we're going to talk about for the next maybe like 10, 15 minutes just to kind of go over it. And so, Todd, you get to start because I have to go make another drink. So, but I have my headphones in so I can still
Who was that?
participate.
Okay. Who
Oh,
am I
yeah.
asking the question to?
Oh, I am still here.
Okay.
Listen, I
Okay.
may be a banjo, but I'm the banjo of God, so I'm everywhere.
All right.
So, yeah. So, what is the origin of this book?
So you're asking me that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm asking you that. I'm going
I
first.
was confused. Okay. Honestly, I think I saw a call for submission and in 2022. I think it was Trio House. And the first version of this manuscript was called Reindeer Light because I wrote a very weird, bad poem about going to a funeral, but there's a reindeer in the front pew. And I loved this poem because it was strange and it spoke to me in a way that like I couldn't define, but I never could finish it. Anyways, I wanted to get a chapbook together and I asked Ben to help me with it. And and Ben was like, "Great, here you go." And then I said, "Okay, I'm gonna submit this to Trio House," and then I never did. Um, I tend to not submit things, or I'm very slow to submit. I just think it's like it's just not something that really interests me, and I have to get sometimes people to urge me to submit in order for me to send stuff out lately. Because I would rather just focus on the work. But what happened afterwards, a few months afterwards, I saw the call from Variant, and I knew Variant because I know through social media the team there, and they're all great, and they're
Oh,
all
we should name the awesome team over there.
well. So I know like Adrian and Taylor specifically, and I know people who've met them in person, and they've had nothing but wonderful things to say. Maddie in particular is someone, my friend Maddie, is someone who just would never would well, like she just calls it as it is and like she 100% um is a champion for Variant. And when people are enthusiastic about the people who work for a publication or a press, that gets me excited about it because that means it comes kind of built in with an element of trust. And then on top of that, Taylor Bias was the one selecting manuscripts. And obviously Taylor's fantastic. Um, and her chapbook through Variant, I loved the cover, the gold embossing. The chapbook itself is wonderful. It felt good to hold in addition to good to read. And so I got a little bit of that. Like I would love to be part of this press too. And then I just started working on the manuscript for a couple months with Ben, and put this together. The poems are comprised almost entirely of stuff I wrote between 2020 and I guess 2022. Very much focused on the pandemic. And what it was like to be a father in a pandemic with a 4-year old, but also a 4-year old who was sort of lost for a long time, because I was working at the hospital and I kind of shifted to communications. So I was working from 7 to 10 every night. And my wife, who works at a school, was shifting that school to online. So that first year of the pandemic, she was working from like 7 to 8, and we just had to find ways to piecemeal parenting together, and it was so awful because my daughter couldn't wasn't getting the resources that she needed to thrive, and you try to make up for it where you could, but it was a real struggle for us. And as I kind of mentioned at the beginning of this reading, that um, I wanted to I wanted to be able to move past that, but I didn't know a way to move past that. And I think assembling this book and working on these poems and sending them out into the world was also a big element of my catharsis. And being able to, now I'm working on book two. Um, and yeah,
Well, you kind of answered the first two questions with that
right.
origin and process. Look
Yeah.
at you multitasking.
I have my notes, so I'm gonna
Oh,
jump
see, I
there.
made no notes. I was just going to make something up.
Mm.
Okay. Oh, you actually did one through three. Oh my
Yep.
God. Okay, question. Wait, am I supposed to do one through three next? Is this like a tandem?
I don't know. I
Okay,
didn't know if we were going
I
to talk
will.
after you
I will,
read.
because I'm going to be real fast. Um,
Wait. Can I ask it then?
yeah.
Can I
Oh,
ask?
by
Let me
all
do it.
means, ask,
Okay.
ask.
So, we were talking about this prior to letting people into the Zoom room, chat room, whatever you call it. But Ben emailed me a poem titled Decent Proposal in January of 2020. And he said it's a poem that he's had for a while. And like he told me tonight, I just found out it's a poem from his quote, live journal days. Um, and I remember I said to him, I think this poem is a lot more, I copy and pasted this from our emails. I think this poem is a lot more complicated than it seems. There's almost this sense of it was that much more ours because it was never supposed to be ours in here, which is really difficult to unpack. And Ben wrote back, yes, that's my point. How do you appreciate and embrace a thing that was never supposed to be? An opportunity you never imagined for yourself. How do you engage that? And then he wrote, must think on this one. And so he wrote that in January of 2020, before like all the shit hit the fan. And I can say that because I said shit in my poem, I guess. Um and uh and he thought on that, and yeah, he ended up with this amazing book. So Ben, with that as sort of like a pseudo origin, how did you go from there? How did this manuscript go beyond that? What'd you think on?
Well, uh, I thought so that poem and the title, which kind of the new title, which came later, actually didn't come about until what, almost 2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And because I had Twang, and parts of this book were in the second half of Twang, which you remember, you had
Mm-hmm.
seen that. And Brian Borland at Sibling Rivalry and a couple other places had told me this book is too long, it's too vast, you need to split it in two. And then I remembered our conversation about this poem, and then my buddy Dustin Brookshire and I were trading some poems, and I had written a poem, and he was reading it, and he was like, "This is a whole different book." And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Okay." And then that was when the idea of going back to your email and the whole notion of it was never supposed to be. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why in this book, there are multiple poems that play on the title.
Right.
It was never supposed to be ours. It was never supposed to be. I was supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
What was supposed to be ours? The
Mm-hmm.
divorce poem, which I'm gonna read that one tonight because I didn't get to read it a couple weeks ago. Um, yeah, so it sort of became a theme, and I heard uh Victoria Chang read in the Elliston Poetry Room many years ago at the University of Cincinnati, where I work. Shout out to the UC people who are in the audience tonight. I see Felicia and Alicia and Melissa and Lori and Rachel. Uh, and I know Holly's out there somewhere. Yeah, so, and she talked about writing for the book versus just writing a bunch of poems and it becomes a book,
Mm-hmm.
and that
My process, hopefully.
yeah, like she very intentionally writes for the book, and I
Right.
had not actually thought about that before, and I thought, oh, I'm going to write for the book, and I'm going to talk about what wasn't supposed to be, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
was going to talk about it from the perspective of being poor and country and watching 30 years of progress, amazing glorious progress,
Mm-hmm.
make no mistake, right? But what is that for people who are poor and rural and don't really have access to certain culture and things? And yeah, I thought about that a lot, and that was sort of like how it became, and it really
Mm-hmm.
did become writing for the book. Like, and you know this,
Mm-hmm.
like a couple, like, whoa, wait, when did these manuscripts get picked up? I have an entire software migration memorized in my
I
head
believe
right
it was
now with,
December of 2023, right?
oh,
Or it
no,
was
22 is when we submitted. They were picked up in, it was right after my mom died, so it was like spring of 23.
mm.
Um,
Oh no, yeah, that's when I got. Okay.
yeah. Um, and I just totally lost my train of thought because then I started thinking, oh, what is the loan rule for oh my goodness, my job is eating my brain like a worm.
Well, let's here
Um,
we could pivot. I want to talk about process too, because one of the things
oh
I
yeah,
love
yeah,
about
yeah.
your work in general, but especially this book, is that it feels very now, and very, very present. And the narrators that you have in the book seem very like vivacious and alive, while also they seem to have like one foot in this very specific time, like the Clintons, the early Bush presidency, decades ago. And it's it, your book does what my favorite thing when a good poem does it. Like I love it when a poem makes me forget where I'm at or who I am, and it finds a way to embed me in it. Um, and so can you talk maybe about how process involved looking back at being reflective, but also doing it in a way that places readers in those moments?
Yes. So I knew that I wanted it to cover 30 years, right? Like I wanted it to go from Don't Ask, Don't Tell to
Hmm.
Obergefell. That's not exactly 30 years, roughly. And but I wanted it to travel time, but also be independent of time, right? So I let time be associated with pop culture and politics and people and proper names and places,
Hmm.
but and not it's the same speaker through the book, but the stories that are told and the experiences that happen were from multiple people and sources, not even myself all the time. Um, but yeah, I thought about the whole, oh my God, and I'm forgetting who said it, but like when fashion and music are done correctly, when they're classic and timeless, like no matter how far into the future you watch it, you will think, oh wow, that feels so fresh.
Hmm.
And I wanted that energy in the poems so that they felt contemporaneous even as they were time traveling, because I'm big
Hmm.
on simon, you know me, you and I have emailed about this. I'm really big into simultaneous time theory,
Uh-huh.
that all time is the same time
Yep.
happening at the same time, and it is simply our perception of time created by the earth and the sun and the solar system and all that yeah, time is not. Time does exist because it's a force between gravity and distance, um, but not in the way that we think about it. Anyway, okay, we
Right.
just went astrophysical there, and I'm about to go into the zodiac, so I'm going to stop. Um,
Ben's chapbook Sagittarius A, which this reminds me of, and this covers it, is also fantastic, and you should pick it up.
but so yeah, short answer, I wanted it to be timeless and classic, but also travel time and like grab those points. And I wanted the speaker to take the reader on a journey because that was part of writing for the book. And so process was really doing a lot of research. And as you know, there's like the poems that are in the book, there's twice as many that didn't make it
Mhm.
and have gone off in other directions. Like I have a pamphlet coming out next summer from 14 Poems Press called Stiff Wrist. And a
Mhm.
lot of poems that didn't make it into this book are actually in that book because they talk about aging and physicality and like adapting to change that you didn't expect. Because this
Mhm.
book is talking about change and adapting to change and wrestling with it, but very philosophical. Whereas the poems that sort of are like, well, what is it like physically to have those things manifest physically? A couple people were like, these have to be a different book, and they were completely right. So yeah,
Do you want
it.
to then you want to read some stuff to
I
us?
probably should because I just saw the time.
Yeah.
Did we answer all the questions? Oh, wait,
We have a
no.
social media question.
Oh, we're skipping that because I don't care. Um, but we have to do the fifth question because you know I love questions. I literally, okay,
Oh, right, right.
I
So yeah. I
I
was gonna
literally emailed Todd. I said, then because I love random things that reveal the artist as much as the art, we have to talk about songs or music that relate to the work, if any, and what are you listening to now? You go
okay.
first.
So I maybe was trying to dodge this question a little bit because this is a
I know you were, that's why I did
yeah.
it.
So I love music. And like I was a clarinetist. I played through college. I was on scholarship to play clarinet. And then I was in a rock band. I played bass. I really love music. And it's a big part of my life, and even to this day. And I get obsessive about things. And so I was on a kick for a long time. I was just listening to just a ton of Vivaldi. And that led me to Debussy and Satie. And then lately now, I have been listening to Bill Evans, who, if you don't know him, he is an excellent jazz pianist, who he played with like Miles Davis. He's one of the greats. But he comes from a classical background, and is very similar to Debussy. And actually, I by accident started specifically listening to this album that he made, called Alone, and it was just him and a piano, and I loved it. Before I knew the history behind it, it just felt like what it's like to be in a dark room, and to want to be adjacent to knowing. It may be reaching for knowing and understanding, not just your environment or yourself, but just like things that may be potentially beyond you. And it it's so well equipped with silence in a way that is unlike a lot of jazz, that it just felt always fresh and new and novel to me. And come to find out, the album was because he was a heroin addict, and he went to a producer and basically was like, I need money for more heroin. And and the producer was like, "Great, sure," and set him up in a studio. And Bill Evans, just it was him tinkering around, and his most famous song is called "Peace, Peace," and it was from that album. And I've been really asking myself, and partly because of this question, Ben, but it's been like a sudden like, why does this appeal to me? And this is covered partly in Ragnarok and partly in my my debut Ways We Vanished. But my mom was a drug addict, and I think something about how, you know, I mean, I can't speak specific because it's not intention, but there's something now in my knowing that Bill Evans did this in the face of addiction, but he still made something. Um, it speaks to me or resonates with me as someone who was also, made by an addict, um, in a way that I'm still unpacking. And I think it's beautiful and sad. Um, and it makes that quiet that envelops the whole album, um, that much louder and present in me because my mom passed, um, and partly as a result of her addiction. So yeah, that's what I've been into lately. I'm sorry. It's a bit of a bummer, I know, right?
That's okay. I'm about to pivot.
Also lots of stained. Just get the dishes done. No.
Wait, seriously,
No,
Stained?
no, no.
I was gonna say, oh, I'm about to pray for you. Oh my
Um,
goodness.
so Ben, I was gonna play in this question a bit because uh you have these poems that are set in these bars and these clubs and these scenes, and like a lot of times the music isn't specific. And so I was going to say, in addition to answering this question, in your poems, Unconscious Honey or Swoon, what's playing in the background?
Well, Unconscious Honey is Bedtime Story by Madonna. You're welcome, Stefan. Um, which was written by Bjork.
Mm,
And um, I love that song, that 1994. I thought Angie was maybe going to make it tonight. My old friend from college and undergrad, and our first writing class together was the semester that Bedtime Stories by Madonna, which just celebrated a 30th anniversary, came out. And that song just absolutely, Bjork wrote it with lyrics to sort of make fun of Madonna.
mm,
Words are useless, especially sentences. But then, like, Madonna turns it into like this insane work of art of music. And then the video that came with it was so innovative and crazy. And there was a remix that I heard at an old gay bar in Huntington, West Virginia. And I will never forget because it was one of the first times I understood the thrall of the throng. When it's just like this conglomeration of bodies like moving together and having that, I mean, that remix and that song was very dysrhythmic, but in that cavernous space and all those bodies, like that feeling is what I've sort of wanted that poem to capture. And then it
Hmm.
just kind of worked there. Actually, there's a ton of Madonna, like Beautiful Stranger, obviously a Madonna's hit from 1999, which is the time that literally the title of that poem in the book is simply there to create the timestamp for that poem as a millennial Y2K, as things were really starting to change and improve health wise for a lot of people, which is weird because then several people I knew died that year of complications from AIDS. Um, yeah, so there's like Prince references and all that kind of stuff. I created a playlist to write this book to
Mm.
called "Are You Still Mad?" from the Alanis Morissette song that was a hidden track on Jagged Little Pill. That's the opener. And then it's about 6 hours of all my favorite like mid 90s. Actually, it goes 1995, 2005, 2015, because I wanted to have those musical touch point years that uh, sort of cross the bridge of, oh, the link to the playlist. It's not public. I suppose I could make it
Not yet.
public. Yeah, yeah, we'll see. Um, Yes. So I am a playlist person. That's how music plays into my writing. When I start a project, I need to create a vibe. And so I always make, once I have like the idea for the project and maybe like a handful of poems, I make a playlist and I listen to that playlist while I work on the book, like, or the poems. Yeah. And it I even have like one where I'm just like if I'm just drafting, it's called Quiet. And it's like 6 hours of all my favorite bass heavy down tempo um music that I just absolutely love. Like
Hmm.
the first song on that playlist is Protection by Massive Attack with Tracy Thorn on the vocals, which I just think is one of the most perfect songs and performances in history. It just I can't even tell you how much it means to me. So yeah, it's really about the mood and the vibe. And I've tried to like listen to jazz when I write. I like jazz if I'm writing fiction,
Mm.
but not poetry.
See, I can't stand it when people are saying anything, and so that like any lyric, I feel like suddenly is invasive, and that's why I like jazz
Hmm.
because um it gives you something to listen to, but also in a way like you don't step away from it, but it can enter you in a way where I don't have to
Right.
listen to it. Whereas the lyrics, I wanna my
Yeah.
my inclination is always to explicate. I have to.
See, as my partner Aaron knows, I love a dance break. And so
Mm.
I will be in the middle of revising a poem or sending you or somebody else notes. And the dance break comes on, and I am jumping up from the table, dancing around the place like ridiculous.
No,
Yeah.
my breaks are this black cat of mine who's stalking me. I have a little laser pointer, and I'll just like play with her around the house. So
Oh my gosh. Okay, I just saw that we are like getting to like
yeah, you need to
almost
read
10
you need
till
to
10.
read some
So
beautiful poems.
yeah,
We do
so
need a
and I'm
dance
not gonna have a
break.
dance. There are no dance breaks on camera. No. Like, no, those days are over.
I'm gonna introduce you.
So
I'm gonna introduce you.
yes,
Okay, I'm
okay,
gonna read
let's
this
go. Let's
bio.
do it. I got my
Um,
set list ready.
Hailing from the farmland valleys of West Appalachian foothills, Ben Kline, he, him, lives in Cincinnati, Ohio. A poet, library professional, storyteller, Madonna superfan, and, according to his uncle Jerry, a renowned exaggerator. Ben is the author of the chapbooks Sagittarius A and Dead Uncles, as well as the collections It Was Never Supposed to Be from Variant Lit and Stiff Wrist from 14 Poems. His work has appeared in Poet Lore, Coppernickel, Florida Review, Southeast Review, Diagram, Poetry, and other publications. Please snap and give your emojis to the brilliant Ben Klein.
Thank you, Todd. I wish more of you had your videos on. I do Zoom readings in gallery view because I like to see everybody. Not because I don't know that you're real. And maybe your hair is like messy or you're like laying there in your sweats and you're like drinking, I don't know, whatever. Oh, hello everybody. Hey Steven. Oh my God. Oh my God, your beard, dude. I love it. Okay. I am going to open with the opening poem. It was never supposed to be ours. And then I decided to read poems I have never read before versus reading all the thematic poems. And then I'm going to, oh, look at Katie. And oh my God, Katie just flipped me off. Where is Aaron? I thought you guys were like playing games. He's hiding, whatever. Okay, let's get this started. It was never supposed to be ours. Our uncles were silent and buried. The internet infant. Drag queens still use names like Fonda Peters, and bowls of free condoms glowed on the bar of the Driftwood when I promised to keep you safe, supplied with Twizzlers and good gin, warm, not sweaty, when we spooned nude, your body like the long L of my last name under yours when we signed the lease. Cousins, we told the landlord. We had no idea. How could we, under all the eulogies, waterfalls buffering one line at a time, your reverend calling us fags, the Clintons resembling hope, maybe change when you unlock the door? It's musty, but it's ours. That old attic with two windows. We had no idea. Our uncles marched into graves our grandmothers left no lilies on. You made me banana pancakes, crispy bacon, and a decent proposal. The tungsten ring in my mimosa, a blue wish I wanted to shout when it touched my lips. I love that poem. Okay, this one just was in Copper Nickel. I love this one. Yes, it was inspired by real life. It was a different time in 1994. Gay Saints, more Warhol than wild, the chair says of my manuscript, leaning on me, such clumsy enjambments, swirling his third old fashioned since the reading wrapped, naming 10 better writers in my cohort of 12. You're just one more little queer singing his lonely self, his Maplethorpe aspirations, every image framed to enhance the arc of my deltoid he massages, my waist, geometry only Jen understands. I understand the fear of wasting time I might not have, the boundless days between blood draws and results. He says even Whitman would dismiss you, pulls me into the coat check, his kisses all dry push and no heat. You're like every other cute guy, unused to choice or chances, standing here in 1996, the first year of maybe living past the silence, hoping I never forget Keith, Essex, Freddie, all the uncles lost, wondering when dreaming returns. My lover would have thought you're great. Okay, I'm going to read this one because, oh my God, who was I talking to? Oh, it was my friend Heather last night at dinner. And she did not know that I lived in North Carolina for a while in the mid 90s and almost got a job at Duke University Press. Uh, yeah, it would have been a different life. Anyway, this poem is inspired by the creeper who stalked me at the Park and Ride in Durham Chapel Hill for 2 months. And now we have this poem. Idle hands. I strutted toward the blue LeSabre, idling in the park and ride, a switchblade behind my back, unsheathed. I admit I miss the risk, the window between his grin and my arm descending the blade slipped under his jowl, his moan, his hand closing gently around my wrist, a simple yes. Oh, should I read the president? No, I'm not reading that poem. Yes, Crystal, you did in fact read that poem for me many, many years ago. Thank you. I love Crystal. Everybody, you should get Crystal's chapbook rabbit hole. Crap, I have it here somewhere. Google it. Rabbit hole chapbook. It's there. Okay. This is a long poem, and it is written in the form of a state of Ohio divorce decree, and it's called it. So we're fast forwarding through time. We're going after Obergefell, yada yada yada, because I it's all 10 o'clock already, and I don't want to keep everybody. What was supposed to be ours in the matter of the marriage of you and me, 46 months since Obergefell, we arbitrate 15 years and 3 hours with Zoom attorneys digital contracts, formulae for liquidated distribution, populating spreadsheets with yours, mine, not ours. The plaintiff, in your complaint, filed as a resident of San Francisco, California, asserts that the 15 years were enough, that what was supposed to be ours wasn't what you thought it would or could be. The defendant, in a response filed as a resident of Cincinnati, Ohio, asserts no objection other than requesting the court note that I tried. Findings that I contributed to what was ours, hereafter referred to as the good decade, the condo overlooking the river, the timeshare in Saugatuck, the Labrador, sexual elasticity and polyamory, long weekends toward familiar acceptance, the Tesla, the Mercedes, and the debt, the Wrangler you bought when you took a liking to your trainers, my teasing that it looked like something your mother would drive, almost cause jealousy and unrecognizable differences. It is therefore ordered, adjudged, and decreed that the marriage is hereby terminated and held for naught, no fault assigned by the court. It is further ordered, remaining assets shall be divided equitably, excluding one, the blue two-story on Ord Street, its big window toward the bay, by reason of my name never being on the deed with the hyphen I refused, and two, the gold wedding plate engraved, we have the opportunity. It shall be melted and sold, the proceeds placed in trust that we tried. It is further adjudged hereafter, Listen Without Prejudice, Volume 1, must accompany blue mud on my brow. The friends who were mine must text about what next instead of why. It is thus finally resolved, I must remember opportunity likes to change the locks. Okay, I'm going to read one more from the book, and then I'm going to read two new things from Future Things, and then we're going to take questions, and then we'll get out of here. Wait, hold on. I need to turn. I love seeing all of you. Hey, Melissa, I see you. Hey, Chris. Oh, look at all the library people here. I love it. So Todd and Crystal will recognize this poem. This one has taken on a lot of forms. Aaron will recognize this poem. Um, it's this is the poem that's had the most rejections I've ever gotten from a poem from journals. It has now been rejected 61 times. I had to look today. But it is in this book, and I'm doing an interview for this book that'll come out in the next year. And the interviewer was like, "Oh my God, I love this book." Da, 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 da. And I was like, "Oh, thank you." Okay. We've come so far to go. The physician's assistant tells us PrEP might improve our odds against COVID-19 too. It's important, she says, tugging the suture through the gash in my shin, her mask not covering her nose, to find liberty where you are. I tell her that Larry Kramer died yesterday, my birthday, without recent comment on Fauci or Operation Warp Speed. No last pearl, no zingers, just dead. She shrugs. The suture hisses. Unless I'm wrong, she says, turning to my lover playing solitaire on his phone. Or your chart is old info. He shouted, No, don't! When I rattled the gutter with the broom, the footstool broke. My blood hosed his face. We're good, he says, not watching my loose skin curl into a sneer. The PA shrugs. Well, it's an option I wanted to share. She ties the end, and we return home for several days of itching that stops when Lou Sheldon dies. My lover says, Lou who? Ruining my joke about who's living a death style now. Same as my fight with the starlings in the eve, and my desire to know if one plague pitted against another is far-fetched, despite their similar spikes and my odds when I started swinging the broom. This is something, my lover says, unboxing the animatronic owl I hope terrorizes the chattering whose roost smells of wet grass stuffed in the vent above our bed. It's an option I wanted to try. 40 years of trying compressed into glowing eyes and a pitchy hoo hoo. All right. That's it from the book. I'm going to read two more, one of which is going to be so I have another book. It's out to a publisher. It's complicated. We can talk about it offline. Um, Todd has read this poem. I've never read this poem. I just wrote it a few weeks ago, but I love it because it's so Appalachian. Twang is about growing up poor Appalachian during the AIDS crisis in the Reagan era and religion. And in Appalachia, there is a native tree called the pawpaw tree that has like this weird fruit. I'm just gonna say it. It smells like cum. And but you can eat it and you can make custard and ice cream, but if you eat the seeds, it will kill you. So here's a prose poem called Pawpaw. On Dad's side of the family oak, every boy above 12 knew about the pawpaw, their church purple flowers and nether scent, their big bad seeds. Aunt Marty Renee would bake bread with them, add too many raisins, then peel and salt a bowlful for scooping at Granny's Decoration Day picnic. Granny called it Grave Day. All the men I know are underground for this damn country, she'd say. All of them no good anyway. Marty Renee watched for whose nose twitched above the pudding, who shifted in the hips. She sent the shifty boys to the holler where the men were shooting bottles and beech trees. When Uncle John C. warned us about the toxins, how even a few seeds could rot your guts and limp your dick. The skin, too, he'd say. You got to open it and get in the mushy part. He flopped his lumpy tongue inside his cupped palm. I knew what he was really talking about. A shifty boy was no good, too. My tongue newly forked, combing bushes, ready to seed. Every day, a grave. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm going to read one more and then we're going to do questions. Okay, tablet, cooperate. What is going on? Here it is. Okay, so I'm going to read from one more poem from Stiff Wrist that's all about aging while gay without any examples of how to age. And I love this poem because I wrote it right as I was about to turn 50 this year. Aging is stupid. Time isn't an illusion. because the body tells you otherwise. So, anyway, this is called Humpback. The clickbait banner claims cougar is the most searched type of porn, making it my lucky year to turn 50, to turn away the young men who follow my crow's feet across the room at fundraisers and wedding receptions, their arms jostling like my lumbar saddlebags, their hellos mimicking the nod they offer their grandpas and sugar daddies. My college friends email 80s lyrics as if I'd forget. And someone in the group thread insists we're jaguars. I'd rather be a giraffe or a salamander, bright spotted and unconcerned about losing my tail, about aging or sex we try to maintain after gravity and DNA decide our knees no longer can. But jaguars know the risks of serenade trysts, late nights unkind to our waning digestion. Our fate, another says, is an idea given to us, a meme we shouldn't ever like, a dew cloth never touching the ground enough to know how flesh gives. Maybe I'd rather be a humpback, crooning across the seas, unaware of the time I spend eating my weight, yet pleased by an occasional backflip, wowing the watchers in the bay. Thank you. All right. Now it's time for Q&A. I'm supervising three kids. What's your relationship with the line? Oh, okay. We already have some Q&A. Todd, you can take this one. Isaac says, I'm supervising three kids right now, so I can't video, but here's my question. What's your relationship with the line? What kind of arguments do you have with it? We can't hear you. Okay, well, I'm going to answer that question while he figures that out. I think of the line and its break as a knife. And so if the poem is a steak, I'm going to take my knife and cut up the steak so that everybody can eat it in the most pleasing way. That's what I think. Todd, are you there? Bye, Adrian. Love you, miss you. We still can't hear you. All right, ask questions in the chat. I gotta open. Wait, can you do a hand raise? That was fun to read that Paw poem. I hope people enjoyed that. I like that poem. It's very I have to say that's a poem that if my mom was still alive, she actually would probably like it. Tell me more about literary friendships, how to be a good writer friend. Oh, that's easy. Two things, honesty and consistency. And remember that consistency doesn't mean every day, every week. It just means you're consistent. We got you, Todd. What does the artwork of your book cover symbolize? Okay, while Todd fixes his mic, I'm going to talk about my cover art. So the artist for my cover art is George Gozum. He is an artist and designer out of New York City. George and I met on an X-Men comic book message board back in 1998 and have been friends ever since. Like we've hung out numerous times in New York. He's a Manhattanite from the late 80s. And we share this like deep love of like queer art and comic books. And when Variant said yes to letting me come up with my own cover art, I immediately knew that I wanted George to do it because I wanted the cover to be both fashion queerness and comic books. And so you can see he kind of created that energy. And it was his idea to do the wedding dress and the tuxedo with the harness. We came up with that idea way before, oh God, what's his name? Chalamet. We just watched Little Women with him in it last night. So yeah, great actor, but we did it first. And I wanted it to be something borrowed, so that's why the dress is like Dior. That's a Dior, like a play on a Dior design that has been played on multiple times. Anna Taylor, I don't remember her name. She wore it to the Oscars this year. Um,
Sorry, Ben, I'm
and
gonna jump
the
in. Oh, you can hear me now. Okay,
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
back.
yeah, we can hear you. And
Okay.
then like the tattoos. So in the tattoo on the rib cage is actually lines from It Was Never Supposed to Be Ours and George's signature. And like he did the pearls and the dress and the tattoos and like the idea of like not showing their faces so it would be universal, which is sort of like comic book framing, that it's all framed like a comic book. And then he came up with like the wedding invite. He is so talented. I have multiple pieces of his artwork and I have gifted his artwork. And yeah, I'm going to put his name in the chat. So if people want to look up his, like you can Google him and he has a couple websites where you can buy his work. It's so amazing.
So I
He
love
actually,
sorry, I'm gonna jump in because I also want to
yeah,
say I
yeah.
love like you can't see it because like of Ben's shoulder, but they're linking hands
Oh,
and that goes
yeah.
across the spine and there's a certain metaphor, like a physical metaphor in the cover of the book too, where like if you open the book and you open yourself a little bit away, like you can see this connection that wasn't supposed to be, but it is, and you're holding the connection too, and I think it's so freaking cool. It's such a cool cover. Like, I love it. Sorry,
Yeah.
dorking out.
Hold on. Oh no, I'm gonna add like a wider view of it so that here we go. So that
Yeah.
people can kind of see that it does that. That was also my idea was the pinky, but George was like the rings and the cuff and all of it. And something borrowed, something blue. Oh, and like when you get the physical book, there are all these Easter eggs in
Hmm.
the doily marginalia that relate to poems in the book. There are like we went full on Taylor Swift with like Easter eggs and all that kind of stuff. So Todd, I've talked enough. Talk
Yeah,
about
I'm
this
like
artwork.
overdue. So line breaks. I'm currently working on like an essay about this, and I'm very worried that it might turn into a book. Um, and let me like respect to doing this while also supervising three children. Because Lord knows that's, I mean, I had to put my son to bed tonight and that was just me and him and that took about 2 hours. So thank you for hanging out while also doing that. But I think the line break, I think enjambment is a type of if you could give syntax to vibes, I think enjambment is something that does that. Um and the way you deploy that within the poem, I think is really essential. I mentioned it in one of the poems that Ben read, but he does that really well. I think I
Oh, dude,
dislike
you do enjambment like it's so precise and like a paintbrush. It's stupid.
I love line breaks so much because I love I don't know, like it's the difference between listening to a CD of cello music and discovering that you have a neighbor who plays cello and she practices with the windows open. There is an opportunity at the end of the line where you can invent your own syntax and grammar. You can add music that diffuses not just through the bottom of the poem, like you're not deploying a craft in a way that's solely from the top down verticality, but you're doing it in a very cerebral, three-dimensional way that is so unique to poetry. And so wonderful, and I love it so much. And I'm not going to be able to answer that question concisely, but my DMs are open. If you ever just want to talk about enjambments or line breaks, I
Todd is
will.
also an Aquarius, so
Yes.
succinct. I'm a Gemini, so I'm like,
Yeah.
answer.
Listen, Aquarius, but Pisces moon rising, so I will be succinct, but also prone to crying. So just be careful there.
I don't cry.
I know. I do all the time.
Oh,
Have
that's
you?
not true. There's a couple things that make me cry. Somebody somewhere on HBO makes me cry. Anyway.
There's a commercial of like this like old German guy lifting weights, and apparently you find out it's so he can lift his granddaughter to put the star on top of his Christmas tree, and like that's death. Like that is for me like, oh, I need to drink water because I am currently dehydrated and offensively puddling my couch. All right. What did I miss? Another one?
We had so somebody asked about literary friendships, although we kind of we d- so ma actually okay, Megan, I clock you. We kind of talked about it, but how to be a good writer friend, I kind of touched on that a little bit. I mean, I think being a good writer friend is one, being honest, being consistent, but not overreaching your expectations, right? Like if somebody doesn't send you a poem for a month, but you send them poems and they respond or vice versa, you have to be okay with that.
Hmm.
For example, I'm going to give you an example. This week alone, I think Todd has sent me like 5 draft pieces,
Some of
and
them, I don't
I
know if
have
you would call them that. Yeah. But
eh, as Holly Prohaska would say, um, but like I am overwhelmed with a project at work that is eating up all my short-term memory. And so uh I have not been able to write for a little bit because I just don't have the mental capacity. But but yes, that consistency, regardless of like the ebb and flow, and like you can't think of it as like one up, one down, right, Todd? Like I think you have to accept that some people are going to have fertile periods and some people are going to have fallow periods, and that's okay. There was an interesting thread about that going on Blue Sky this week, and I thought, it you just have to be patient with people and let them have their space and have your space, and
I
but
don't know if I this is
you
not
have
my
to work and
approach.
cultivate it. What is your approach?
I don't think there's such a thing. I think you have a writing partner or someone that you work with, and then that becomes your friend. And I maybe this is just I'm real close with my kids and I'm a little juvenile and I'm a little tipsy now, but my kids are so happy to see their friends. And I'm like so happy to see my wife. When I see Ben's face or a new poem, I'm just so freaking happy. Like I don't know. Like I am when I see someone that I care about, I am Randy Savage snapping into a Slim Jim. I am Larry Bird and Michael Jordan, like throwing free throws from 4 years away. I'm like, yes, I'm here, I'm present. And I think if you have questions about what a literary friendship is and how to be a better friend, I think it's really not about what to expect from someone else, but what you expect from yourself. And I think the short answer is love. Um, and I think equipping yourself with a sort of enthusiasm and then also knowing maybe where the enthusiasm ends and like being clear about that, setting boundaries and all of that. But I don't know, like some of my best friends who are also my writer friends, I've sent them manuscripts and they've just never replied. Um and I just was like, "Oh, well, you couldn't read it then." And, that's it. Um and they still send me poems
Interesting.
and I still send them poems and like I think it's understanding and maybe this is also like me being someone who moved to Philly and didn't have any friends here and no like social network. So I just sort of got to understand that sometimes people weren't around, people weren't available, especially when you're trying to navigate making friends and things like that. It just got, and then I started not being available and not being around. I think your writer friendships are just your friendships. And I think if you go into them expecting performance metrics or like an idea of like I send you something and you send me something and it's a mutual exchange, I think that's a little bit of deteriorating of what the relationship could be, you know? And I think once you I think if you're thinking about writerly friendships and you're not beginning with what you are just okay with letting go, and if you're not beginning with an enthusiasm and an adoration with a person's work and their intelligence, um, and then also you're not equipping yourself with the forgiveness you need to maintain a relationship, then I don't think it's going to ever be as beautiful as it could be. And and yeah, and like Ben said, I've deluged him this week with drafts.
I
And
read them at lunch.
yeah, and like I have no expectations, and I emailed him this. I'm sitting here, I email him these poems, and then I realized I didn't respond to an email from him earlier this Sunday, and like in the perspective of friendship and of, like if you were evaluating it based on performance, like I was a low performer this week. But my God, I love Ben and I love his work and I love this book and I love how his work is so varied and yet at the same time you enter it from any door and you feel like you're in this giant house and you still haven't discovered all the rooms. Like, I don't know. I'm engined by this enthusiasm and this adoration and um I think if you begin there and you end there, it's going to be great always.
Yeah, it's all about giving the space, right?
Yeah.
And I say that as somebody who I like pretty much anybody until I don't, and then I'm ready to put you in the cow pit. That's an in joke for people in the audience tonight who know what the cow pit was. Um, so I love that there are a bunch of Philly people here
Mm,
tonight because one of my coworkers was like, "Tell us about your presentation at ALA." So I found out yesterday that I'm part of a reading series at the University of Cincinnati and we're a team and we do what's called Poetry Stacked, and we stage poetry readings in the library stacks with a faculty or alumni or a Emeriti reader, a community poet, and student poets. And we bring them together and we curate it to it's always like, what's the story? What's the vibe? What's the energy? And what's been beautiful is that you all know, people know universities. It's all about your metrics and like your DEIA and what is your ROI and all these things. We don't think about any of
oof.
that. We're like, what is the vibe and the story that we're going to tell the audience on that day? And what is the beautiful, unique experience that we're going to create? And then we created a anthology of all the work. Oh my God, now that I say that, I'm gonna send you all a link because we dropped the price on the anthology and it's a gigantic handmade art book anthology with Todd was mentioning Taylor and a bunch of other people are in it, and it's only $25. It would be a really good, it actually is like an amazing gift. So I'm going to post a link to Poetry Stack. But we actually got accepted to present at the ALA annual conference this year. So the ALA is the American Library Association. It's like this enormous conference, and it's in Philly this year. And Poetry Stacked is going to go and present and talk about to other librarians what we do. I know the University of Seattle just launched a poetry series inspired by Poetry Stacked, and they came to our presentation at AWP back in February. And so I'm going to be in Philly next June, and my intention is to do. I've got some connections, and I'm going to figure out how to do a poetry stacked offsite for ALA, even though it's librarians, but like, and bring some of the university community and community poets and like do like a poetry stacked event at one of the libraries. I actually met some of the public service librarians at the Free Library in downtown Philly when I was there last summer. And yeah, so if you're in Philly, if you're like a Todd fan and you're from Philly and you're in the audience, you got to keep an eye out for that. Cause like,
Listen, if you're a Todd fan, I'm a U fan. You Philadelphians will figure out.
exactly.
Let's
Yeah.
find a way. Let's find a way to meet up. I wish I had a way to like do that now. Again, my DMs are always open. Just email me or DM me, and we'll connect. And then,
If
God,
there's,
Ben, we will welcome you with trumpets and banners.
oh, and
And
you
then
know,
Steven's.
we're funded. We have money too. So I'm just saying. I pay honorariums to everybody who participates. Like, because I was all about, well, I want it to be equitable. Like I want the student to get the same honorarium that a faculty person who's had 4 books published and has awards. And maybe the student has only published like 2 poems,
I
right?
love that. Yeah,
So I'm all about because that's important to create like community. Like we're talking about relationships between writers, but we we have a tendency to like have our readings in cliques and groups and communities, and I really wanted something that used the the superstructure of the institution to do something to bring groups together that maybe don't always get to participate together and then pay them and say your work is just as valuable as this other person that in by any other metric is considered to be, A and you're B or whatever,
right.
So
I
okay, Todd, we
yeah.
had we had another question,
Hierarchical
and we're gonna
thinking,
let
I
people.
could go off on that all day. If you are an older writer and you want to like dispose of your own hierarchical thinking, please start talking to younger writers because they're all brilliant. They
Yes,
have new perspectives and
yes.
they're wonderful and they don't need proof or evidence of intelligence. They're it's been some of the best conversations and the best feedback that I've gotten is speaking to someone who may not even be out of undergrad yet. And it's such an invigorating thing. Steven,
It
your
really,
question.
we have one more question. Then we're gonna cut it off because I want to go eat some like ice cream or something.
So one of the biggest barriers or walls that we hit with a new poem? And obviously the biggest barrier is that the poem was bad. Um, and the breadth and depth of that is obviously a variable. For me, um when I draft a poem, I almost oh my cat's scratching me. Um simulate sort of the submission process because I send my stuff to Ben and he like as I harped on and like also like poems of struggling with I'll send to Lee. I have a bevy of first readers. And one of the first things I do is I want to simulate the submission process because I think everyone has kind of felt that I've just sent a poem off to submittable and now I know what's wrong with it. Um I oftentimes inadvertently start there, and Ben knows it because he'll receive a new draft of the poem like 2 hours later. Um, so one of my strategies is trying to understand when I can and how I can step outside the perspective of someone who's drafting the piece and step into the perspective of someone who's encountering the piece. And finding ways to simulate that and finding safe places to simulate that, I think is really helpful. Um, I also think that if I'm struggling with particularly the end of the poem or the beginning of the poem, um, I tend to lop off the top and bottom like pretty aggressively. Um, I tend to think about poems after I've drafted them and maybe after I've gone through a couple of edits in terms of the velocity that exists within the first three lines. And if there is not an enjambment, or if there is not an image, or there's not something there that is going to pull my reading down lower to the rest of the poem, I know it's time to either realize what language exists for me to enter the poem versus what language exists that the poem needs. And the same for an exit. I think sometimes, especially when I end a poem, a lot of times it is the same type of ending as being at a family gathering and saying goodbye. Like you want to like say with this image goodbye to this, and you want to like leave with these impressions and this promise to call back or whatever. Like it is too couched in trying to accommodate how I feel leaving the poem, and ultimately does not result in any material that the poem needs. And so I try to like keep those two things in mind. Um, so just chief recapping, a non-drafter's perspective, and also understanding what language exists within the poem that's there for me versus what language the poem needs itself. Thank you, Megan.
I'm going to give a much simpler answer to Stephen's question, and then we're going to wrap it up. I love you, Todd. That was such a Todd answer. I love it.
He calls me
I,
Tidy
I'm good.
Todd, by the
I
way,
I
in our
do.
emails.
Oh my God. Shh. I call so Todd's poems are like Christmas bow, like Christmas ribbon, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. When you go to the department store and they wrap it in that thin ribbon and there's not a goddamn wrinkle in the bow whatsoever. That is when I know Todd's poems are finished. Tidy Todd has tied that bow and it has like 8 loops, and the little tongue of the ends are like perfectly, they like wave, but there's no wrinkles. That's Tidy Todd. On the other hand, I okay, I got to go back up to the question. People be up in the chat, keep them busy.
Ben
Okay,
is so
biggest
funny because I'm gonna jump in a little bit. He loves mess, but like his things that he champions with me are what he calls knife lines. And
yes.
it's such a good reference to like even his own poem where he's about to like shiv an asshole. Like he knows where the blade exists, and it's so
Mm-hmm.
great because I'm
I
like,
do. That's because I
good.
grew up carrying a switchblade tucked in the band of my underwear for
Right.
the bullies. Come on now.
Lee,
There
you're not
was
allowed to
a
use that. Don't say perfect.
but- Anyway, biggest barriers in walls in a new poem for me is always I have not unlocked the song underneath the image. Because for me, it's like I always write with the intention of how is this going to sound when it comes out of my mouth, and not in a spoken word kind of way, but just is it going to sound like me, and is it going to have that cadence, and is it going to have that honesty that I can say, yes, that came from within me. And that is always my barrier and my wall of, oh, this doesn't sound like me, and I'm not being authentic. And to write through that to get to the authenticity, it's two things. It's time and space, distance, or I got to change the playlist. And that might sound crazy, but it's the truth. Like, I sometimes have to be like, the energy is not here, the playlist is not doing it. So, oh my God. Okay, I see what I'm
Congratulations,
gonna
Brian.
stop. Yeah, Brian Brusso, you won the free books. That is so awesome.
I would just like to
My
say
buddy.
that was not like the Oscar music trying to cut you off. That was my like clumsy hand. hitting the air.
Oh no, you
What
Continue.
the
you have to
hell? How
cut us
dare you
off.
give books away?
No, also you have to cut us off because we've
Right.
been on Zoom before. Like we will start at like 8 o'clock and go until 1 in the morning.
It's
So
true.
like we need to be done because, like I said, I want to go eat ice cream and yeah.
Jamie, thank you for the album recommendation, by the way. I've copy and pasted that in my Google search. I'm gonna check it out. Appreciate you.
I want to thank everybody who came tonight. Those of you who stuck around for our like slightly tipsy chitter chatter and our pithy attempts at erudition. Ooh, okay. I've officially
Let's
had.
say it three times
Oh,
fast.
wait. Somebody named Jamie just raised their hand. Is Jamie wanting to come off mic?
No, I think Jamie, after I talked about Bill Evans, recommended a song or an album to check out, and I have it queued up
Oh,
in my Google
okay.
search, and I was just saying, appreciate if you, unless you want to jump in and speak about it.
Oh, wait. Hold on, Jamie. I'll unmute you. Here, hold on.
Okay, thank you. No, I just wanted to briefly comment. The reason that I was recommending it is because just based on what you were saying about what you found appealing about something else, that album is the like at once like one of the mellowest albums and also like one of the craziest albums I've ever heard. It's basically like a guy, his wife dies of like cancer like a few months after she just had a baby, and he finds
Mm,
himself, and this is real, this is his real life,
mm,
and he finds himself suddenly like a single father to a baby. And
mm.
that album is him processing that experience as it happens, and it's fucking brutal.
Right.
It's like real ass shit, and I love it.
I'm gonna listen to it. I am not done drinking. So I'm gonna go pour another and then turn
That
that on.
you do that. I I'm done. I want some ice cream.
I will say just one thing Ben said about the song behind the image. I think Stephen, to answer again your question already, we often Ben and I talk about, and I think I talk about this with Lee too. What's the thing behind the thing? I think it's one of the questions that I carry with me into everything. And if the language in the poem is not giving me the thing behind the thing, I know it's not done. But there's a way that poetry and language is proximity to meaning and understanding. And understanding that and diving into your failures as you try to become approximate to what it is you're trying to say is so key. And just asking yourself, does this thing reveal the thing behind the thing? Has been a big part of my process. And
And sometimes you realize that the thing behind the thing is not what you actually wanted the
yeah,
poem to be about.
yeah.
And so you do a very heavy duty Ross Geller pivot and you realize that you have to go in a whole different journey to fix that poem and then take the thing behind the thing and go write another poem. It's actually that obstacle will lead you down a road toward future creation 100%.
This is also one of the reasons why I love using weird images. I sent Ben this poem this week. I read a poem about Darth Vader riding a horse down my street, and
I loved it.
it started as play, and I realized the poem was about how much I love my wife, um, and how sometimes you wear the absence of the people that you love because they're not there, and they're not there to see the thing you want them to see, and I hadn't, that was not where I began. I began with like, wouldn't it be funny if I saw Darth Vader on a horse? And then I ended with, wow, I love my wife, you know? And
But
so
that
giving
was
your,
what I liked about reading that, right? Was like
yeah,
I could see you starting at point A and going to part ZZY.
mm,
That was why I was like, get rid of those last lines.
yeah, no, you're right. You're right. So
Anyway. All right, kids. Grandpa's got to go to bed.
thank you everyone for coming
Yes,
and
thank
celebrating
you.
our work and hanging out with us for so long.
Y'all did great. You
Megan,
guys are amazing.
thank you. Megan, we'll stay on with you for a minute while everybody logs out so we can wrap up the
Okay.
recording.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Bye
everyone.
everyone.
Bye,
Thank you
Stephen.
Thank
again.
you
Bye,
for
Lee.
coming. Oh, I should have set
Ooh,
David to reader
I
for
get bigger
variant.
as each person leaves. I don't like that.
Well, that's a poem.
Okay, I'm gonna very nicely. Can I like?
Can you what?
I'm gonna very
I would just
sweetly kick
stop.
ya.
Well, I would just stop recording now.
Oh,
Yeah, hit the stop recording.
I'm about to rap. Are you sure?